Shalom, I'm Rabbi Eric Yanoff, and welcome to Center of Gravity. About 2.5 centuries ago, the Rabbi Rav Nachman of Breslov said words that sparked the imagination of Jews and what it means to be Jewish in this world. He said, Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tsar ma'od, that the whole world is like a narrow bridge. And then Rav Nachman continued saying, V'ha'ikar lo lefached klal, that the most important thing is to try not to be afraid, even knowing the narrowness of this bridge. We at Adath Israel approached a moment when Jews were perhaps feeling the most vulnerable, the most afraid that we have in maybe 3 centuries. And how we did that was to nourish the connectivity of the center, of being able from the center to see both sides of the bridge, and knowing that we may be in a thinning, narrowing moment of that center, with the poles gaining traction and voice, knowing that this fear of being in this narrow place could be answered through nourishing that connectivity from the center. My colleague, Rabbi Markowitz, and I both took different approaches on how to connect and to find strength and reassurance in a time when this bridge feels perhaps the narrowest of all. We're going to talk about how we came to our high holiday sermons to approach this sense of being anxious, the sense of being vulnerable for our community and beyond. This theme of Gesher Tsar Me'od, of a narrow bridge. That's the melody that comes immediately to mind, is that Kol Haolam Kulo Gesher Tsar Me'od. It's narrow bridge, the idea that we live in sort of uncertain times that can sway one way to another, that we're not entirely sure of who's with us and who's in front of us and who's behind us and whether we're going to reach the other side.
It's indicative of how tenuous the world seems at this moment and how perilous it seems, the whole notion of it there being a narrow bridge, that we're finding that balance in a world that is totally off balance.
And that inspired our Rosh Hashanah sermons, both of us, in a big way. We knew we were coming into a room that was almost going to be vibrating with Jewish anxiety. And Jewish anxiety vibrates at a particular frequency.
When there's nothing going on, it's vibrating. When there's something going on, it's very, very, it's vibrating.
Yes.
It's not a,
and so we knew that going in, and part of the sculpting of a sermon is imagining the sort of collective emotion in the room. And it didn't take a lot of imagination this time around. We have been counseling on these points. We have been having informal conversations at Kiddush after services on these points for months and months and months.
It's really been half a decade.
Right. I mean, it goes back to the first venturing out, it being, first of all, isolated in COVID, and then venturing out and relearning what it means to be together and play together in the same arena or sandbox. And that created, as we know, sadly, a mental health crisis. It forced us here at Adath Israel, or inspired us here at Adath Israel, I should say, to hire a part-time social worker to allow us to serve our community in this way. But we knew that, and then amplified, of course, by October 7th and the horrors of that day and the aftermath and the rising and creeping anti-Semitism and the sense of insecurity and fear that Jews may not be on as solid footing, and humans may not be on a solid footing as 5, 7, 8 years ago we may have convinced ourselves that we were. That's what we came into our sermon writing with, and specifically on Rosh Hashanah. And I feel like had we ignored that on Rosh Hashanah, we would have been grossly out of touch with our community and the people who came, needing to hold that and to sort of capture that vibrating anxiety.
I think you're correct. I also think that many people wanted us to tackle world issues head on in these sermons.
I felt a pressure, which I definitely want to explore with you, of giving the omnibus sermon. Normally, we try to say, this is what this sermon is about, and I can say it in a half of an elevator pitch, right? Not a skyscraper elevator pitch. We're talking like, what could be a walk-up elevator pitch, right?
Yeah.
I felt like a pressure on that first day of Rosh Hashanah to give the omnibus sermon.
You had to hit everything.
Right. We were doing Israel and anti-Semitism and our need to build a better world and a sense that the world is off kilter. It is, of course, ironic because we're going a little out of order and off kilter even in this conversation. But I wanted us to see all of those challenges of questions that certainly proportionally a next generation, but I think people of all ages were having with our relationship with Israel and our status in diaspora communities vis-a-vis anti-Semitism and the need to build a better world. And I presented these all on the first day of Rosh Hashanah as sort of fruits of a larger tree that we needed to nourish that connection with Israel as one of the fruits. And we needed to combat anti-Semitism as one of the things that has historically driven and activated our Judaism over the last certainly 80 years. And certainly the age-old imperative for tikkun olam, for healing the world, and the Jewish idea of being a light unto nations and a catalyst as a Jewish people for imagining and then building a better world. I wanted all of those to be seen as important, but really also only as fruits of a larger tree that if we don't nourish the roots and the stem and the trunk of the tree, then those fruits out on the long branches they may grow once, but they would never grow intergenerationally to the next generation. I was answering also the anxiety that many parents are having that their next generation of young adults maybe aren't as motivated by the same things that motivated them Jewishly. And so I saw this metaphor of a tree whose fruits can only be nourished by strong roots, the roots of peoplehood, the roots of Jewish practice, the roots of continuity, of connectedness. And without that, we may have one fruit, but it will essentially die on the vine or ripen and not give birth to the next fruits if we don't have the roots. And that became the metaphor for the sermon. And it really was speaking in a sort of omnibus way, again, to all of the anxieties, because it might be part of the Jewish neurosis that we have, that we tend to pile on.
No.
Yes. And so very rarely has a counseling session that I've had over the last 4 or 5 years, and certainly over the last 2 years, been only about one topic. It tends to be about this, and Rabbi, and this. And of course, this context in which we find ourselves exacerbates this challenge that I'm having. And that sort of interconnected web of uncertainty and brokenness and insecurity feels painful, and people are overwhelmed. And especially, as you said, coming out of COVID, we have to relearn what it means to connect, because the sort of crisis of disconnecting was really a part of that. And so my response or my advice on that was to double down on the roots and the trunk of the tree, right? To say, like, yes, the fruits will come and we will stand strong against anti-Semitism, and we will build a better world, and we will reaffirm our connection with Israel, so long as we have that strong-rooted sense of Jewish identity and peoplehood and practice. And it admittedly is an incomplete idea. I will also be honest with you that the nature of doing an omnibus sermon is that it is at its outset going to be unfulfilling. It will not tie things up.
In the Gemara, it says tafasta merubelo tafasta. If you try to grab too much, you sometimes can't grab anything. Yeah,
right. And so that was my insecurity with the sermon. And I did hear that as a critique for some people. I wanted you to speak, focus on this, Rabbi. And then,
how many people also said, no, but I want you to focus on that.
Right.
Or this other thing, or because everybody has their one thing.
Right. And so this was an idea of saying, yes, and all of these things are fed and nourished or not nourished by, depending on our choices, by a sense of coming together, of connectedness. And that was the attempt. Did I hit it 100%? Probably not. I also recognize that in an era of great polarization and divisiveness, that the idea that the fruit on the outer branches was farther away from the trunk and the roots, was, I think, also really an important part of this metaphor. That the things that used to implicitly, automatically unite us in a strong sense of solidarity.
Yeah.
We have to fight this anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
Now we're saying, well, some people think this is anti-Semitic, some people think this is not anti-Semitic, and certainly Israel is a symptom of that. And even Tikkun Olam, that we're not activated and motivated in a sense of unity and solidarity by these fruits, because, again, with the metaphor that they're out on distant branches. And so getting back to the core, the trunk, the roots of things felt and continues to feel important, even if it doesn't address specifically each individual person's cure for each individual person's ailment, right? And I recognize that was the weakness of the sermon. But also, I felt like I couldn't. I had to go to each person and say, I see you and your concern, even if I'm not going to, in this time period, be able to answer it and fix it, because who could? I wanted everyone, or most people, to feel at least partially seen.
For sure, you hit you offered a solution, and it just is a solution that is a lot more work than picking a fruit, right?
Right. If I hold this one fruit and say this is the solution to all things, that may feel good. It's also definitionally false. Now, you came about this sense of, lack of connectedness and insecurity and feeling overwhelmed in the world, feeling sort of off kilter. And you offered another solution, which I think is also energizing in many ways.
So I actually felt like my Rosh Hashanah sermon was a response to my Kol Nidre sermon.
Which is so meta,
Yeah.
right? The idea that the world is backwards and you gave the solution before the question. Okay,
Yeah,
go ahead, continue.
Because my Yom Kippur sermon was about how we're all broken and we are in need of connection, and how we need to embrace our brokenness to get connection. And the methodology that I put forward in my Rosh Hashanah sermon was play. I think that the world that we live in lacks a sense of play, or play as a value. I think there's an issue with American culture in which we see play as frivolous and not the connective tissue that brings people together. And one of the things that I value about our relationship, Eric, is that we have a relationship in which we can play. We get stuff done. We get a lot of stuff done, but we also have fun. And I'm blessed to work in a place where play is an integral part of what we do. And it's also not just a part of what we do interpersonally together, but also how we interact with the community.
I mean, it's how we get to deeper places. If you're willing to try something and play around with it, to use your solution, your metaphor, you're more likely to stumble on something really magical and awe-inspiring and deep. And I think that we have done that more times than we can count.
Yeah, I think that's the bread and butter of what we do here. Then that we bring people in to serious conversations sideways through play. And through something seemingly not serious. I know that one of the things that we have a wonderful group of people who come together on Saturday mornings and learn here at Adath Israel.
Shameless pitch.
Every morning at 9 a.m. Every
Shabbat
morning at 9:15 a.m. We have Parenting the Parsha for families with young children. It's our favorite thing to do. Don't tell anyone else it's shul.
You just said that today.
I'm aware. I told the whole world. And they like to joke that my favorite thing to teach about is human bodily processes, because I find first off, there's a ton in Judaism about human bodily processes.
It's your future book.
It is my future book. It's definitely my dissertation, my PhD. But that's because Judaism really has something to say about what it means to be human, and that's part of what it means to be human. And so, in thinking about how disconnected the world is and has been for the past half decade, and how disorienting that is, and how we are stuck in our silos with like-minded people and don't ever grow or move past, our own dogmas in our own sort of stuck ways. I thought maybe play, which is such a fundamental piece of what we do, it's such a fundamental piece of who I am. I thought, what can I offer as a means for people to find connection in such a disconnected world? And the image again comes from my children, right? Thinking about my son, my 5-year-old Sonny, how he can go up to another little child at a playground and say, "Hey, I'm a helicopter," and the other kid says, "Hey, I'm a dinosaur," and both kids just go with it, right? What would it mean for us to engage with people as they present and to just create worlds together? And that's ultimately what a community is. It's creating a shared world and a shared experience. And it's much more inviting if it's playful.
And if we allow ourselves that ability to have it not work, to lower the stakes, part of the reason that our play backgrounds, why we're comfortable with that, right, is from camp. Right, we spend a lot of time at Camp Ramah the Poconos, and one of the things I do is I teach 18 to 20-year-olds how to be pseudo parents as a counselor in a cabin, in a bunk, in a tzrif, as we say in Hebrew, and one of the things I ask them to do is I ask them to sort of say, the stakes could not be lower. I ask them to say, what's the worst thing that could happen? To allow that sort of natural energy to play out. And then I also, because you have to teach them responsibility and because they have not developed a full prefrontal cortex yet, I ask them to say, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? And then ask the question, no, really, what's the worst thing that could happen? So that they actually get a sense of the bounds of what makes the play safe, which is our role as adults when kids are playing, right? Not too close to the edge, right? Not at the top of the stairs. That's our role. But once we create those boundaries that for safety, then to allow anything to come about is really where the magic happens, and really where we often, it feels like accident, but we've actually set up a context in which very deep, curative relationships can be fostered and affirmed. And that's what I took from your
and reaffirmed and reaffirmed over and over and over again.
Exactly. And when we do that, and when we allow ourselves that, like liberate ourselves in that way,
we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, because there's a real fear of rejection when that happens. When you say to someone, "I want to help, I want to build something with you," you're offering a piece of yourself that they could very easily reject. And we've learned, we learned when we were when we were middle schoolers, that to protect ourselves from the other. And
right, no middle schooler that I know says,
"I'm a plane,
I'm a helicopter, I'm a dinosaur," and everyone goes with it.
Yeah.
Maybe in an improv club, right? But other than
those are very special children.
But other than that, you hear that sort of
there's a judgment.
Reality of judgment.
There's a judgment.
You're not.
No, you're not, because everyone's is jockeying for social position, and that's sort of what we see in the world around us, is that we have a world jockeying for social position where we should really be jockeying for connection.
Right. What would it feel like to allow ourselves to connect first, and then say, okay, what are we going to build?
What do we need?
Right. Oh, you're a dinosaur? That's perfect for this world that we're going to build. And I'll be a helicopter. That too is perfect. And I know it sounds absurd when we say it like this in sort of high-minded, analytical ways. But on the ground, the greatest ideas have come about in a safe but accidental experimentation.
In relationship. Ultimately, we all need to be in relationship for one another and with one another. That's what's going to save the world.
And I think that maybe is a nice thread between our two sermons. Is, I use the metaphor of a sort of uniting trunk, where the most divisive issues were out on the far branches, and we had to nourish through the trunk and the roots sort of out so that we could treat these very important and critical issues of Jewish consciousness and of world consciousness.
Yeah.
And you sort of also said there's a connectivity through play, right? That there is a way of allowing ourselves to first connect and then solve these problems. In our counseling relationships, which obviously we're mass producing this when we're giving a sermon in front of hundreds of people, but in our closer counseling relationships that people have sought us out for over the past, as you said, half decade, I think that that's what we do is the fact that someone has come into our counsel, into that relationship, already creates a deepness, a depth, excuse me, and a respect and a mutual respect, and also a reliance, right? Like I can trust you.
Yeah, and that is a type of play because there is a vulnerability with it, right? You're both entering roles together, and
those roles have definitions,
very clear definitions,
right? Ethical definitions.
Yeah.
And when we do that, the relationship crystallizes, and usually out of that, some wisdom comes. My hope, I guess, my hope from our sermons is it's not as tight a conversation when you're speaking to hundreds of people, obviously,
for sure.
But is that when people walk away and they ask us questions about that, or they seek deeper conversation. I mean, that's essentially what we're doing here, right? Is we're giving the sort of inside baseball look under the hood of these sermons, right? And saying, but I hope that people, when they walk away and they say, oh, there's a connection there. I felt something. I want to explore that. I want to play with that. And maybe out of that, even though we're not solving all of the world's problems in one sermon, maybe we take the first step, or we open the door, and whoever may walk through, we create that connection, and we make an incremental improvement possible.
Can you hear it? So
may it be God's will. Amen. Kol ha'olam kulo gesher sar ma'od. These words that the world is a narrow bridge and we're in uncertain times, believe it or not, they've been set to a song that people of all ages sing. I sing it with our early childhood program. Kol ha'olam kulo gesher sar me'od. And once I asked some of those kids, 3 and 4 years old, what do you think it means to be on a narrow bridge? We're talking about, in another episode, about what it means to learn from our children. So I'm going to tell you what this kid taught me. He said, well, Rabbi Eric, when you're on a narrow bridge, you can't stand next to and hold the hand of someone that you love. You don't know that they're there until you get to the other side. As we stand on this narrow bridge, part of the purpose of this podcast, of speaking from the center and knowing and being able to see the far sides, is to know that, in fact, there's someone there. I hope that's a bit of a reassurance that even if we're in these narrow, uncertain times, that there's someone there, as that 3-year-old said, to hold our hands. Thank you. And shalom from Center of Gravity. Thank you for tuning in to Center of Gravity. We are working to make this podcast as engaging and meaningful as we can, and so we need your help. If you have any feedback, questions, comments, thoughts, ideas for future podcasts, or any other ways that we can reach you, please email us at centerofgravity@adathisrael.org. Thanks so much for tuning in. Shalom.